I stared at the sterile room that I was now supposed to call home. A twin bed with hospital-grade sheets, a worn dresser, and a small window overlooking a gray parking lot. 67 years of life, and all I had to show for it was a 12 by 12 space at Golden Sunset Retirement Home, a name that seemed like a cruel joke considering my golden sunset consisted of faded beige walls and the constant smell of disinfectant. "It's just for a few weeks, Mom." Sloane's voice still echoed in my head. "Until you fully recover from your fall. It's what's best for you." The fall. A slip on the kitchen rug that resulted in nothing more serious than a bruised hip and wounded pride. But somehow, that minor incident had snowballed into this. My daughter and son-in-law convinced I could no longer care for myself in the 2-story colonial home where I'd lived for the past 40 years. The home where I'd raised Sloane. The home where I'd nursed my husband, Elliot, through his final days before cancer took him 5 years ago. I ran my fingers along the windowsill, collecting dust. Some retirement home. I might be 67, but I was far from ready to be warehoused like outdated inventory. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Without waiting for a response, a woman in her 40s with a bright smile and a tablet entered my room. "Mrs. Thornbrook, I'm Dr. Lakshmi. How are we settling in today?" She spoke in that peculiar sing-song voice people often use with children and the elderly, as if age had somehow affected my hearing or intelligence. "It's Ms. Thornbrook," I corrected, "and I'm not settling in because I don't plan to stay long enough to settle." If my bluntness surprised her, she didn't show it. Instead, she nodded sympathetically while tapping something into her tablet. "Adjustment periods are perfectly normal. Your daughter mentioned you might be a bit resistant." My daughter doesn't know me as well as she thinks she does. Dr. Lakshmi pulled up a chair and sat down, still smiling that professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Your file says you were an English teacher for over 30 years. 12th grade, correct? Advanced Placement English Literature, yes. I bet you were fantastic. I always loved my English teachers. I wasn't in the mood for small talk. When can I make phone calls?" "You can use the community phone in the recreation room anytime between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., but you're also welcome to keep a cell phone in your room." My daughter has my cell phone. She was supposed to bring it today, along with more of my clothes and my prescription reading glasses. I looked pointedly at the single small suitcase that sat at the foot of the bed. She said she'd be here by 2. Dr. Lakshmi checked her watch. "It's only 3:30. I'm sure she's just running late." I knew better, but I nodded anyway. "Is there a place where I can get some decent coffee around here?" The brown water they served at lunch was an insult to the word. This earned me a genuine laugh. "You're in luck. Mr. Finley in room 207 smuggled in a coffee maker last month. He hosts an unofficial coffee hour at 4. I'm not supposed to know about it, of course." She winked. "I'll keep that in mind." After a few more questions about my medical history and medication, all information I'd already provided during admission, Dr. Lakshmi finally left me alone with a schedule of activities I had no intention of attending. Bingo, watercolor painting, and chair yoga held absolutely no appeal. By 6 o'clock, Sloane still hadn't arrived. I'd left 3 messages with the front desk, each more terse than the last. By 7, I'd missed dinner. Not that the rubbery chicken and mushy vegetables I'd glimpsed on other residents' trays seemed worth mourning. At 7:30, my room phone finally rang. "Mom, I'm so sorry." Sloane didn't sound particularly sorry. In fact, she sounded like she was somewhere noisy, music and laughter in the background. "Something came up at work, and then traffic was just impossible." "Where are you? It sounds like you're at a party." A slight pause. "I'm at the airport, actually." "Airport?" My stomach tightened. "What airport?" "McCarran, in Las Vegas. Look, I meant to tell you earlier, but with getting you settled and everything—" "You're in Las Vegas?" I gripped the phone tighter. "What about my things? My glasses, my medications, my clothes?" "I left a bag with the front desk this morning before you arrived. They were supposed to bring it to your room." Another pause. "Mom, it's just that this trip was planned months ago. Pierce has this big real estate conference, and Cordelia thought it would be nice if I joined them since we rarely get to spend time together." Cordelia. My son-in-law's mother. The woman who'd made it clear from day one that I wasn't good enough for her precious son's family. And now my daughter was vacationing with her while I sat in a retirement home with one change of clothes and no reading glasses. How long will you be gone? I fought to keep my voice steady. Just a week. 10 days at most. 10 days? I couldn't hide my shock. Sloan, you told me this was temporary, just until we could arrange for some help at home. The background noise suddenly dimmed, as if she'd moved to a quieter area. Mom, we talked about this. The house has too many stairs. You're all alone. And after your fall, it was a minor fall. This time. But what about next time? Pierce and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if we look into selling the house. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Selling my house? You can't be serious. It's too big for one person, Mom. The property taxes alone eat up a huge chunk of your pension. And the market is hot right now. Pierce says we could get top dollar. I noticed her choice of pronouns. We. As if my home of 40 years was suddenly a group decision. As if I had no say in the matter. I need to go, Mom. They're calling our boarding group. I'll call you when we land, okay? Try the activities. Doctor. Patel said they have a book club that meets on Thursdays. You'd like that. It's Dr. Lakshmi, I corrected automatically. And Sloan. But she had already hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone still in hand, as the pieces fell into place. This wasn't temporary. My daughter had no intention of bringing me back home. The few weeks story was just to get me to cooperate with the move. And now she was in Las Vegas with Cordelia Harrington, probably sipping champagne and planning what to do with my house, my life, while I sat here with strangers. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. A tall, wiry man with a shock of white hair and surprisingly bright blue eyes stood in the doorway. He wore a cardigan despite the June heat and carried 2 mugs of what smelled gloriously like real coffee. New arrival, huh? Missed the infamous dinner service, I see. He held out one of the mugs. Thought you might need this more than me? Name's Atticus Finley, room 207. Coffee smuggler extraordinaire and former chariot driver of the New York City streets. Taxi driver? I accepted the mug gratefully. Yellow cab for 37 years, ma'am. I've seen it all. He remained in the doorway, respectful of my space. Mind if I come in? These hallways have ears, and what I'm about to tell you isn't for the management to hear. Despite myself, I was intrigued. Please do. Atticus entered and closed the door behind him. He lowered his voice conspiratorially. First thing you should know about this place, the locks on these doors are a joke. Second thing, they don't actually check if we're in our beds at night unless you're on the special watch list. I raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting a jailbreak, Mr. Finley? Just sharing information, Ms. Thornbrook. Waverly Thornbrook. Like the university? Like the street I grew up on. He nodded approvingly. Well, Ms. Thornbrook, I couldn't help but overhear your phone conversation. These walls are thin as communion wafers. He didn't look the least bit apologetic for eavesdropping. Sounds like you've been hoodwinked. Apparently so. I took a sip of the coffee, strong and black, exactly how I needed it. My daughter and her husband have decided I'm too decrepit to live independently anymore. And now they're in Las Vegas with her mother-in-law while I sit here with one change of underwear and no plan. Atticus snorted. Classic move. My son did something similar, though at least he had the decency to wait until I had a minor stroke. What's your excuse for being here? You look healthy as a horse to me. I slipped on a rug, bruised my hip. He let out a low whistle. Criminal. Absolutely criminal. What about you, apart from the stroke? Oh, I'm just stubborn and inconvenient. My son and his wife wanted to convert my apartment into a home office, and apparently I was in the way. He shrugged as if it didn't bother him, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. Been here 8 months now. It's not all bad. The Tuesday pudding is decent. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, drinking our coffee. Through the thin walls, I could hear a television playing too loudly, someone coughing, the squeak of a medication cart being pushed down the hallway. So what's your plan? Atticus finally asked. Plan? You don't strike me as the type to take this lying down, Ms. Thornbrook. I considered this. He was right. I'd spent my entire life fighting for my education when my parents thought college was wasted on a girl, fighting for respect in a male-dominated department, fighting for my husband during his illness. I wasn't about to stop now. First, I need to get my belongings. Then I need to get back to my house before my daughter and son-in-law can put it on the market. Atticus grinned, revealing slightly crooked teeth. Now we're talking. And how do you propose to do that without transportation, money, or your ID, which I'm guessing is also with your daughter? I hadn't thought that far ahead. My shoulders slumped slightly. I don't know yet. Well, lucky for you, I still have friends in the transportation business. And as it happens, I've been plotting my own exit strategy for some time. He leaned forward. What do you say to a little adventure, Ms. Thornbrook? 2 senior citizens on the run, heading for… Where exactly do you live? Montclair, New Jersey. Perfect. I know those roads like the back of my hand. And your daughter? She's in Vegas for at least a week, you said? I nodded, a plan beginning to form in my mind. Mr. Finley, are you suggesting we escape this place and drive to my home in New Jersey? That's exactly what I'm suggesting. And then, if you're feeling particularly vengeful, and I hope you are, we could even continue to Las Vegas to confront your daughter and that snooty mother-in-law of hers. The idea was absurd, reckless, completely irresponsible. And yet, as I looked around at the institutional beige walls of my new home, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a spark of defiance, of adventure, of life. Mr. Finley, I said, extending my hand formally, I believe this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. His weathered hand clasped mine firmly. Call me Atticus, please, and we leave tomorrow night. I suggest you rest up. As he left with our empty coffee mugs, promising to return with details in the morning, I lay back on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. For the first time since being dropped off at Golden Sunset, I felt a smile tugging at my lips. My daughter thought she could discard me like an outdated appliance. She thought wrong. Waverly Thornbrook was not going quietly into any Golden Sunset, not without one hell of a fight. Morning at Golden Sunset arrived with the clatter of meal carts and the squeak of orthopedic shoes on linoleum. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with plans and righteous indignation. The thin mattress hadn't helped either. It felt like sleeping on a slab of concrete covered by a beach towel. I made my way to the communal dining room, determined to maintain appearances until our escape. The room was filled with circular tables, each populated by clusters of residents in various states of awareness. Some ate with gusto. Others stared vacantly at their food as if trying to identify what exactly they were supposed to be consuming. Waverly, over here. Atticus waved from a corner table where he sat alone. As I approached, I noticed he'd secured an extra banana and orange from somewhere, which he discreetly slid toward me as I sat down. Breakfast protein, he explained under his breath. You'll need your strength. A harried-looking aide dropped a tray in front of me. Runny eggs, limp toast, and what appeared to be oatmeal, but had the consistency of wallpaper paste. Slept well, I hope? Atticus asked loudly, then lowered his voice. The night attendant does bed checks at 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Marjorie at reception leaves at 11, and the overnight guy, Eduardo, usually dozes off around midnight. I've timed it. I poked at my eggs. You've clearly done your homework. 8 months is a long time to observe patterns. He sipped his orange juice. My buddy Roscoe is picking us up at 12:30 a.m. behind the service entrance. The door alarm is busted, has been for weeks. Management's too cheap to fix it. And Roscoe is reliable? I kept my voice low. Drove a cab with me for 20 years. Man's never been late a day in his life. He owes me several favors. Atticus winked. I'll meet you in the east stairwell at midnight. Pack light, whatever you brought, and anything useful you can swipe from the supply closet. I glanced around nervously. This seems… criminal? Atticus finished. Technically, we're both adults of sound mind who haven't been declared legally incompetent. We're not breaking any laws by leaving. We're just being creative about our departure method. He had a point. I wasn't imprisoned here, even if it felt that way. Still, my heart raced at the thought of what we were planning. It had been decades since I'd done anything remotely rebellious. The last time might have been in college when I'd participated in an anti-war protest, much to my parents' horror. Oh, one more thing, Atticus added casually. I went to the front desk this morning. That bag your daughter supposedly left for you doesn't exist. I checked twice. The news shouldn't have surprised me, but it still stung. Of course it doesn't. But, he continued, sliding a small paper bag across the table. I did manage to convince Dr. Lakshmi that you needed reading glasses urgently. These are from the donation box, not prescription, but better than nothing. I opened the bag to find 3 pairs of reading glasses in varying strengths. Atticus, thank you. Don't mention it. He waved off my gratitude. Now, you should show up for at least one activity today. Makes it less suspicious. I recommend chair yoga at 2. Instructor's half-deaf, so no one will notice if you're not following directions. The day crawled by with excruciating slowness. I dutifully attended chair yoga, where I sat in a circle with a dozen other residents, half-heartedly raising my arms while an enthusiastic 20-something instructor encouraged us to connect with our inner trees. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the small library, trying to read with my new non-prescription glasses and planning what I would say to Sloane when I eventually confronted her. By evening, my determination had only grown stronger. During dinner, some unidentifiable casserole, I quietly collected extra packets of crackers and a few fruit cups, slipping them into my sweater pockets. Atticus, across the room, gave me an approving nod. Back in my room, I took inventory of my meager possessions. 1 change of clothes, a nightgown, basic toiletries, the reading glasses from Atticus, and my wedding ring, which I'd refused to remove during the admission process despite the staff's warnings about lost valuables. It wasn't worth much in monetary terms, but the simple gold band was irreplaceable to me. At 11:30 p.m., I changed into my day clothes and packed everything else into the small suitcase. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the sounds of the retirement home settling for the night. The distant murmur of a television, the squeak of the medication cart, an occasional cough or call for assistance. At 11:55, I took one last look around the room I'd never really accepted as mine, and quietly opened the door. The hallway was dimly lit with nightlights, casting long shadows along the worn carpet. With my heart pounding, I made my way toward the east stairwell, trying to walk naturally in case anyone saw me. True to his word, Atticus was waiting, dressed in dark pants and a black sweater despite the June heat. He carried a small duffel bag and wore a cap pulled low over his forehead. "Ready for our prison break?" he whispered with a gleam in his eye. "As I'll ever be." We descended the stairs slowly, mindful of our knees and the need for silence. The service entrance was at the end of a poorly lit hallway past the kitchen. As Atticus had predicted, the door's alarm panel showed a red error light rather than the steady green that would indicate an active system. "Ladies first," he said, holding the door open. The night air hit me like a revelation, fresh and warm, carrying the scent of nearby flowering bushes. After just 36 hours in the institutional staleness of golden sunset, even the parking lot air felt intoxicating. We huddled in the shadows beside the dumpsters, waiting. At exactly 12:30, headlights appeared at the far end of the lot. A dark sedan pulled up quietly, lights dimming as it stopped. "Right on time," Atticus murmured approvingly. "That's our chariot." The driver's window rolled down to reveal an elderly black man with a salt and pepper beard and bright, alert eyes. "Finley, you old troublemaker, when you said you needed a ride, I didn't think you meant a jailbreak." "It's not a jailbreak if you walk out voluntarily," Atticus replied, opening the back door and helping me inside. "Roscoe Washington, meet Waverly Thornbrook. Waverly, this is the second best cab driver in New York City history." "Second best, my ass," Roscoe snorted, but his eyes crinkled with humor. "Where to, folks?" "Montclair, New Jersey," I said, the reality of what we were doing finally hitting me as I settled into the back seat. "My house on Maple Avenue." "That's a good 2-hour drive at this time of night," Roscoe commented, pulling away from the retirement home. "Care to tell me why 2 distinguished senior citizens are sneaking out of a retirement home in the middle of the night?" So as we drove through the dark Pennsylvania countryside, I told him my story. About Sloane's betrayal, about the house she wanted to sell out from under me, about the Las Vegas trip with Cordelia. "Cold," Roscoe commented when I finished. "That's just cold." "My thoughts exactly," Atticus chimed in from the front passenger seat. "Which is why we're not just going to New Jersey. We're going all the way to Vegas to confront her." I blinked in surprise. "Atticus, I never agreed to that part of the plan. I just want to get home and secure my house." "And then what?" he challenged, turning to look at me. "Wait for them to come back and try again? You need to show your daughter that you won't be pushed aside. Besides, he added with a grin, I've always wanted to see the Bellagio fountains. I don't even know where they're staying in Vegas, and I don't have the money for a cross-country trip. Atticus waved dismissively. Details. We'll figure it out as we go. First step, get you home and gather supplies. Second step, hit the road. I have some savings. You must have some too. I did, actually. After Elliot died, I'd been quite frugal, banking most of my pension and Social Security. I had a decent emergency fund, though I'd never envisioned this particular type of emergency. I can't ask you to spend your savings on my family drama. You're not asking, I'm offering. Consider it an investment in justice and adventure. When was the last time you did something completely unexpected? Waverly Thornbrook. I couldn't remember. My life had followed such a predictable path for decades. Teaching, grading papers, caring for Elliot, then quiet widowhood. The most spontaneous thing I'd done in years was rearranging my living room furniture. See? Atticus said, correctly interpreting my silence. We old folks get put on a shelf because we let them put us there. We become too predictable, too cautious. Well, I'm done with cautious, aren't you? His words struck a chord. I'd spent my entire life being responsible, the dutiful daughter, dedicated teacher, supportive wife, and loving mother. Look where it had gotten me. Abandoned in a retirement home while my daughter vacationed with a woman who'd never respected me. You know what? Yes, I am done with cautious. The words felt strange and liberating coming from my mouth. Roscoe chuckled from the driver's seat. Now we're talking. Road trip with the senior rebels. As we drove through the night, I felt a kind of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. The retirement home fell away behind us, and with it, some of the accumulated weight of disappointment and obligation I'd been carrying. We reached Montclair just before 3 a.m. My street was quiet, houses dark, except for porch lights and the occasional upstairs window. When Roscoe pulled up in front of my colonial-style home, emotions surged through me. Relief, homecoming, and anger all mixed together. I'll need to figure out how to get in, I said, suddenly realizing I didn't have my keys. They might have changed the locks already. Allow me, Atticus said, pulling a small case from his pocket. Locksmith's son. Picked up a few skills in my youth. You're going to break into my house? I was scandalized, yet impressed. Technically, it's not breaking in if it's your house, he reasoned, approaching the front door with surprising agility for a man his age. Besides, I'm not breaking anything, just circumventing security measures. Roscoe and I waited nervously by the car while Atticus worked on the lock. The street remained quiet, the only sound the occasional distant car or the rustle of leaves in the summer breeze. He's something else, isn't he? Roscoe commented, nodding toward Atticus. I've only known him a day, but yes, he certainly is. Known him 40 years, Roscoe said. Never saw him back down from anything. Lost his wife young, raised his son alone. That boy never appreciated what his father sacrificed. He shook his head. Watch out for Atticus, though. Man loves a grand gesture. Sometimes doesn't think through the consequences. Before I could ask what he meant, there was a soft click from the porch, and Atticus appeared in the doorway, grinning triumphantly. Your castle awaits, my lady, he called softly. I approached my own front door with a strange mixture of trepidation and determination. Stepping inside felt both foreign and deeply familiar. The house smelled exactly as it should, like lemon furniture polish and the faint lingering scent of the jasmine tea I'd been drinking the day of my fall. Atticus and Roscoe followed me in, closing the door quietly behind them. Make yourselves comfortable, I whispered. I need to check something. I moved through the darkened house with the confidence of decades of familiarity, not bothering to turn on lights yet. In my study, I felt along the bookshelf for a specific volume, a hollowed-out copy of Jane Eyre, where I kept an emergency credit card, some cash, and a spare key. Elliot had teased me about my spy novel hiding place, but I'd maintained it after his death, adding my passport and other important documents. The book was still there, its contents untouched. I clutched the items to my chest, feeling a surge of triumph. Sloane hadn't found my emergency stash. Back in the living room, I found Atticus examining family photos while Roscoe stood respectfully by the door. This your daughter? Atticus held up a silver-framed graduation photo of Sloane. Yes, University of Pennsylvania, class of 2004. Pretty girl. Looks like you around the eyes. He set the photo down. Hard to reconcile with someone who'd dump her mother in a home. People change, I said, the words tasting bitter. Or maybe I never really knew her. I turned on a single lamp, casting the room in a soft glow. I need to pack and secure some things. Then we should rest. I don't think Sloan will have anyone checking the house, but I don't want to take chances by staying too long. You're still considering Vegas, then? Atticus's eyes lit up. I'm considering it, I admitted. But first, I need to make sure my home is safe, and I need to find out exactly where in Las Vegas my daughter is staying. How do you plan to do that? I smiled grimly. By calling the one person who's always known more about my daughter's life than I do, my friend Bertie. While Roscoe made himself comfortable on the couch, clearly intending to nap, I led Atticus to the kitchen and put on a pot of real coffee. As it brewed, filling the kitchen with its comforting aroma, I found myself studying my unlikely companion more carefully. Despite his age, Atticus moved with an energy that belied his 72 years. His white hair was still thick, though carelessly cut, and those bright blue eyes missed nothing. There was something almost mischievous about him, a quality I'd rarely encountered in people our age, who too often seemed to shrink into themselves as years passed. "Why are you helping me?" I asked suddenly. "You barely know me." He considered this, leaning against the counter. "Maybe I'm bored. Maybe I'm tired of watching people our age get pushed aside. Or maybe," he added with a small smile, "I just like the look of fire in your eyes when you talk about showing up your daughter and that highfalutin mother-in-law of hers. Is that what this is about? Revenge?" "Justice," he corrected. "There's a difference. Revenge is about hurting back. Justice is about setting things right." He accepted the mug of coffee I handed him. "Plus, I wasn't kidding about the Bellagio fountains. Been on my bucket list for years." I couldn't help but laugh, the sound feeling strange in my throat after days of tension and anger. "You're a very unusual man, Atticus Finley." "Thank you kindly, Miss Thornbrook." He raised his mug in a toast. "To unusual people doing unusual things." We clinked mugs, and for the first time since being abandoned at Golden Sunset, I felt a genuine sense of possibility. Whatever happened next, whether we made it to Las Vegas or not, I was reclaiming control of my life. As dawn began to lighten the sky outside my kitchen windows, I made a silent promise to myself. Waverly Thornbrook was done being dismissed, forgotten, or set aside. It was time to remind my daughter, and perhaps myself, that my story was far from over. "So," Atticus said, interrupting my thoughts, "what's the plan for today, partner?" "First, I need to call Bertie. She's in a gardening club with Cordelia and might know where they're staying. Then, I need to check my financial situation and pack properly." I took a deep breath. "And then, I suppose, we head west." "West," he repeated, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I like the sound of that. But," I added firmly, "we do this sensibly. No more break-ins or midnight escapes. From now on, we're just two seniors on a road trip. Nothing suspicious about that." Atticus laughed. "Sensible is your department, Waverly. I'm just along for the ride." Somehow, I doubted that very much. But as I sipped my coffee in the familiar comfort of my kitchen, with this unpredictable man across from me and the road to Las Vegas stretching somewhere in the distance, I found myself unexpectedly eager to discover just what kind of adventure we were embarking on, sensible or otherwise. The morning light streamed through my kitchen window as I dialed Bertie's number. I'd known Bertie Calloway for over 30 years. She'd moved next door when Sloan was still in elementary school. While our personalities couldn't be more different, Bertie was outgoing and sociable where I was reserved and private. We'd formed a friendship based on mutual respect and shared experiences of widowhood. "Waverly," Bertie answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. "It's not even 7 o'clock. Is everything all right?" "Not exactly," I replied, glancing at Atticus, who was methodically going through my pantry, selecting non-perishable items for our journey. "I'm sorry to call so early, but I need information." "Information? Honey, aren't you supposed to be at Golden Sunset?" Sloan said. "I left." A pause. "You left? What do you mean, you left?" "I mean, I'm back at my house, Bertie. Sloan put me in that place and then took off for Las Vegas with Cordelia Harrington." Oh, another pause. Oh dear. You knew, didn't you? I tried to keep the accusation out of my voice. Not about the retirement home, I swear, Bertie said quickly. But yes, I knew about the Vegas trip. Cordelia's been talking about it for weeks at Garden Club, some big real estate convention for Pierce, and she convinced Sloane to make it a girls' getaway, too. Where are they staying, Bertie? Why do you want to know? I took a deep breath. Because I'm going to Vegas to confront my daughter about abandoning me in a retirement home without my consent and planning to sell my house behind my back. Sell your house? Bertie sounded genuinely shocked. Waverly, are you sure? That doesn't sound like Sloane. She told me herself, right before she hung up to board her flight. Now, where are they staying, Bertie? Another hesitation then. The Bellagio. Cordelia wouldn't stay anywhere less grand, you know how she is. But Waverly, think about what you're doing. Is confronting Sloane in Las Vegas really the best approach? I'm open to suggestions, I said dryly. Wait until she gets back. Have a calm conversation. There must be some misunderstanding. Atticus, who had been pretending not to eavesdrop, snorted loudly. Who's that? Bertie asked. My traveling companion. I didn't elaborate. Bertie, there's no misunderstanding. Sloane lied to me. She told me the retirement home was temporary, but she had no intention of bringing me back. She's planning to sell my home while vacationing with a woman who has made no secret of her disdain for me. I need to take action now before it's too late. But Vegas? How will you even get there? We're driving. Driving. Waverly, that's over 2,000 miles. 2,521 to be precise, Atticus called out. According to the route I just mapped. 4 days of driving minimum. Bertie lowered her voice. Who is this man, Waverly? Are you sure you can trust him? It was a fair question. I barely knew Atticus myself. He's a friend, I said simply. And right now, he's showing more concern for my welfare than my own daughter. After extracting a promise from Bertie that she wouldn't call Sloane to warn her, not that she'd believe me anyway, Bertie had said, I hung up and turned to Atticus. The Bellagio. Does that work with your bucket list? His grin was answer enough. I'll tell Roscoe. He's agreed to drive us as far as Pittsburgh, where his sister lives. From there, we'll need to figure out the next leg. By noon, the house was secured, my finances assessed, and our supplies packed. I had withdrawn a significant amount from my savings account, leaving enough to cover the property taxes that would be due next month. I'd also packed a suitcase with practical clothing, my medications, important documents, and a few sentimental items, including a photo of Elliot and me on our 30th anniversary and the first edition copy of Pride and Prejudice he'd given me for my 60th birthday. Roscoe, refreshed after his nap on my couch, seemed almost as excited about our adventure as Atticus. Never been further west than Ohio myself, he admitted as we loaded the car. Always wanted to see those big open skies they talk about. You're welcome to join us all the way to Vegas, Atticus told him. More drivers means faster travel. Roscoe shook his head. My sister would kill me if I passed through Pittsburgh without stopping. Besides, someone's got to be able to bail you two out when you inevitably get yourselves arrested. Your confidence is overwhelming, I said dryly, but I was smiling. There was something infectious about the energy of these two men, something that made our improbable journey seem not just possible, but destined. Before leaving, I stood in my driveway and looked back at my home. The morning sun illuminated the white clapboard siding and black shutters, the flower beds I'd so carefully tended, the maple tree Elliot and I had planted when we first moved in, now tall and strong. It was more than a house. It was the physical embodiment of my life's memories. We'll be back, I promised it silently. This isn't goodbye. The drive to Pittsburgh passed quickly. Roscoe and Atticus kept up a steady stream of stories from their cab driving days, tales so outrageous I would have thought them exaggerated, if not for the way they corrected each other on small details and finished each other's sentences. So the guy says, just drive around Central Park until I finish this sandwich, Roscoe was saying. 2 hours later, he's still eating, and I'm thinking, he's either got the world's biggest sandwich or the world's smallest mouth, Atticus finished, and they both dissolved into laughter. I found myself laughing too, more freely than I had in years. There was something liberating about being on the road, away from the constraints of routine and expectation. I wasn't Waverly Thornbrook, abandoned mother and unwilling retirement home resident. I was just a woman on an adventure, The future unwritten. We reached Pittsburgh by early evening and pulled up outside a neat brick house in a working-class neighborhood. A large woman with Roscoe's same bright eyes came hurrying down the front steps. "Roscoe Washington, you said you'd be here for lunch," she scolded, but her smile betrayed her joy at seeing her brother. "Traffic, Darlene, and we had to make a few stops." Roscoe embraced his sister, then turned to introduce us. "This is Atticus and Waverly. They're on a mission to Las Vegas." Darlene's eyebrows shot up. "Vegas? At your ages?" "Age is just a number, Ms. Washington," Atticus said with a wink. "And Vegas doesn't check birth certificates at the city limits." Darlene laughed. A rich, warm sound. "Well, you must be hungry. I've got pot roast staying warm in the oven. Plenty for everyone." Over dinner, we explained our situation to Darlene, who listened with increasing indignation on my behalf. "That's just not right," she declared when I'd finished. "Family doesn't treat family that way. My mother lived with us until the day she died, and while it wasn't always easy, we made it work because that's what you do." "Times change," I said, though I appreciated her support. "Some things shouldn't." Darlene refilled my water glass. "So, what's your plan after Pittsburgh?" Atticus and I exchanged glances. We hadn't actually discussed the specifics. "We need to get to Columbus next," Atticus said. "I have a nephew there who might be able to help us with the next leg." "Columbus is only a few hours from here," Darlene pointed out. "You could be there tonight." Roscoe shook his head. "My old bones need rest, and I'm sure Waverly and Atticus could use a proper night's sleep too. They've had an exciting 24 hours. It was true. Despite the energy of our escape and journey, exhaustion was setting in. The previous night's minimal sleep on the retirement home's uncomfortable mattress, combined with the emotional strain of the past 2 days, was catching up to me. "You're all welcome to stay here," Darlene offered. "It's not fancy, but the guest room has a double bed and the couch pulls out." "I'll take the couch," Atticus said immediately. "Waverly should have the bed." I started to protest, but a yawn betrayed me. "Thank you," I said instead. "You're very kind to help strangers." "Friends of my brother aren't strangers," Darlene said simply. "Besides, I like your spirit. Not many women your age would take on a cross-country journey to set things right. Not many women my age get the opportunity," I replied, "or the motivation." Later, as I lay in Darlene's guest room, surrounded by crocheted Afghans and family photos, I found myself thinking about Sloane. Where had I gone wrong? Had I been too strict, too demanding when she was growing up, or not demanding enough? Had Elliot's death changed her, hardened her in some way I hadn't recognized? My thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. Atticus stood in the doorway, a mug in his hand. "Darlene made chamomile tea. Thought you might need help sleeping." I sat up and accepted the mug gratefully. "Thank you. My mind won't shut off. Second thoughts?" He remained in the doorway, respectful of my space. "Not about the journey, about where things went wrong with Sloane." Atticus nodded thoughtfully. "I've asked myself the same about my son. Never found a satisfying answer." "What happened with your son?" I asked, sipping the tea. It was perfect. Honey, no sugar, just how I liked it. Brandon was always ambitious. Full scholarship to Columbia, MBA from Wharton. Met a woman from a wealthy family, married up, as they say. He shrugged. I was proud of him, but I think he became embarrassed by me, the uncultured cab driver father who didn't fit into his new life. That's awful. It is what it is. Last straw was when they had kids, my grandchildren. They didn't want me around much. Said I was too rough around the edges. When I had the stroke, they used it as an excuse to put me somewhere out of sight. His smile held no bitterness, just a weary acceptance. Golden Sunset was actually their third choice. First 2 places wouldn't take me because I asked too many questions. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. If they hadn't parked me there, I wouldn't have met you, and we wouldn't be on this grand adventure." He raised an imaginary glass. "Sometimes life's worst moments lead to unexpected opportunities." His perspective struck me as remarkably healthy. I'd been wallowing in hurt and betrayal, while Atticus had somehow found a way to move forward with optimism. "How do you do it?" I asked. "How do you not let the anger consume you?" "Oh, I was angry for a long time. First few months at Golden Sunset, I was the resident grouch, scared off 3 roommates." He chuckled at the memory. "But eventually I realized the anger wasn't hurting anyone but me. Brandon wasn't losing sleep over it. so I decided to focus on what I could control, making the most of whatever time I have left. And that includes breaking out of retirement homes and driving to Las Vegas with strange women? Especially that, he agreed with a grin. Life's too short for regrets, Waverly, and too long for grudges. After he left, I lay back down, considering his words. The anger I felt towards Sloane was justified, but I didn't want it to define me. This journey wasn't just about confronting her. It was about reclaiming my own agency, my own life. With that thought, I drifted into the first truly restful sleep I'd had in days. Morning brought sunshine, Darlene's homemade biscuits, and an unexpected development. "I'm coming with you," Roscoe announced over breakfast. "At least as far as Columbus, maybe further." "What about your sister?" I asked, surprised. "Darlene's got her bridge club today and volunteer work tomorrow, says I'd just be underfoot." He winked at his sister, who smiled indulgently. "Besides, somebody's got to keep an eye on you two troublemakers." With our bags repacked and Darlene's generous contribution of sandwiches and homemade cookies for the road, we set off for Columbus. The day was perfect for driving. Clear blue skies, mild temperatures, and minimal traffic on I-70 West. As Ohio's gentle landscapes rolled by, I found myself wondering what Sloane was doing at that moment. Was she by a pool at the Bellagio, sipping cocktails with Cordelia? Was she thinking about me at all? Had she even checked with Golden Sunset to see how I was settling in? "Penny for your thoughts," Atticus said from the back seat, where he'd insisted I take the front for better legroom. "Just wondering if Golden Sunset has realized we're gone yet." "Oh, they know," he said confidently. "Morning med pass would have been around 8 a.m. They probably called your daughter immediately." The thought gave me a perverse satisfaction. Good. Let her worry for a change. "That's the spirit," Roscoe approved from behind the wheel. "Nothing like a little concern to make someone appreciate what they've got." We reached Columbus by early afternoon and headed directly to the address Atticus had for his nephew, Kevin. The neighborhood was pleasant but modest. Tidy homes with small yards, bicycles on porches, the occasional basketball hoop in a driveway. Kevin Finley turned out to be a surprise. I'd expected someone middle-aged, given Atticus's age, but the man who opened the door was barely 30, with Atticus's same bright blue eyes and an expression of utter shock when he saw his uncle on his doorstep. "Uncle Atticus? What the hell? Aren't you supposed to be in a home in Pennsylvania?" "Hello to you too, Kevin," Atticus replied dryly. "May we come in?" Kevin stepped aside, still looking bewildered. His modest living room was cluttered with the evidence of a young family. Toys strewn across the floor, a playpen in one corner, family photos crowding every surface. "Melissa's at the store with the kids," Kevin explained, hastily clearing toys from the couch so we could sit. "So, what's going on? Dad said you were settled at Golden Sunset." "Your father and I have different definitions of settled," Atticus replied. "Kevin, these are my friends Waverly and Roscoe. We're on our way to Las Vegas, and we need a favor." Kevin's eyebrows nearly disappeared into his hairline. "Vegas? Are you serious?" While Atticus explained our situation, I studied Kevin. There was genuine concern in his expression, but also confusion and a touch of amusement. He clearly hadn't expected his elderly uncle to show up on a cross-country mission. "So, let me get this straight," Kevin said when Atticus finished. "You broke out of a retirement home, borrowed," Atticus corrected, "borrowed a car, and now you're driving to Vegas to confront this lady's daughter?" He nodded toward me. "Uncle Atticus, that's awesome!" A young woman stood in the doorway, grocery bags in hand, two small children peering around her legs. "That's absolutely awesome." "Melissa," Kevin sighed, "you're not helping." "What? It is awesome." She set the bags down and came forward to shake our hands. "I'm Kevin's wife, and you must be the famous Uncle Atticus. Kevin's told me so many stories about you." "All good, I hope," Atticus said with a wink. "All wild," she replied with a grin. "And now I see they were probably all true." While Kevin took the children upstairs for naps, Melissa made coffee and listened intently as we elaborated on our plan, or rather, our lack of one beyond reaching Las Vegas. "You're going to need a reliable car," she pointed out. "No offense, Roscoe, but that sedan of yours has seen better days." "None taken," Roscoe replied. "It's got nearly 300,000 miles on it. I wouldn't trust it past Ohio without a complete overhaul." Kevin's brother Mike runs a used car lot, Melissa said thoughtfully. I bet he could set you up with something reasonable. We can't afford to buy a car, I protested. Who said anything about buying? Melissa's eyes twinkled mischievously. Mike always has a few trade-ins he's holding until the right buyer comes along. I'm sure he could lend one out for a good cause. By evening, through a series of rapid phone calls and family connections I couldn't quite follow, we found ourselves in possession of a 5-year-old Subaru Outback that, according to Mike Finley, needed to be driven anyway to keep the engine happy. It's just sitting in my back lot, Mike insisted when I tried to offer payment. Insurance is covered, and you can leave it at the Bellagio Valet when you're done. I've got a buddy in Vegas who can pick it up. Consider it my contribution to Operation Senior Rebellion. Kevin and Melissa insisted we stay the night, and though I was eager to continue our journey, the prospect of a proper meal and comfortable beds was too tempting to refuse. After dinner, with the children in bed and Roscoe engrossed in a baseball game on television with Kevin, Melissa pulled me aside. I just wanted to say, she began quietly, what you're doing is really important. Not just for you, but for Atticus too. What do you mean? She glanced toward the living room, ensuring we weren't overheard. Kevin's dad, Atticus's son, he hasn't visited his father once since putting him in that home, not once in 8 months. It broke Atticus's heart, though he'd never admit it. That's terrible. Melissa nodded. Brandon always was self-centered. Takes after his mother, from what Kevin tells me. But Atticus was a great father. Worked double shifts to put Brandon through college. Never missed a school event. She shook her head. This trip, it's giving Atticus purpose again. A reason to get up in the morning besides chair yoga and pudding cups. I hadn't considered how much our journey might mean to Atticus beyond the adventure itself. Looking at him now, animated as he joined the baseball discussion, I could see a vitality that had likely been missing during his months of institutional living. We're helping each other, I said simply. Melissa squeezed my hand. Exactly. And that's how it should be. That night, in the comfortable guest room of Kevin and Melissa's home, I took out my phone for the first time since our escape. There were 17 missed calls from Golden Sunset, 5 from Sloan, and a series of increasingly frantic text messages. Mom, where are you? The home says you're missing. Mom, this isn't funny. Call me immediately. They're talking about calling the police. Are you okay? Mother, answer your phone. The last message had come just an hour ago. They found security footage of you leaving with some man. Who is he? What's going on? I'm cutting my trip short and flying home tomorrow. This is completely irresponsible. I set the phone down without responding. Let her worry. Let her cut her precious Vegas trip short. Let her feel a fraction of the anxiety and helplessness I'd felt when she'd abandoned me. Tomorrow, we would head west again, this time in our borrowed Subaru, with the wide-open landscapes of the American heartland ahead of us. And somewhere beyond those plains and mountains, my daughter waited, unaware that her carefully constructed plans were about to be thoroughly disrupted by the mother she'd tried to discard. I fell asleep with a smile on my face, dreaming of Bellagio fountains and the look of shock that would grace Sloane's face when her supposedly helpless mother appeared in the lobby of her luxury hotel. Morning light streamed through the windows of our borrowed Subaru as we crossed the Indiana state line. After tearful goodbyes with Roscoe, who had decided to stay with his newfound grandnephew and niece in Columbus, "These kids need to hear my stories," he'd insisted. Atticus and I continued our westward journey alone. The landscape gradually changed, from the lush green of the eastern states to the vast openness of the Midwest. Fields stretched to the horizon, interrupted only by the occasional cluster of farm buildings or small towns that seemed to appear and disappear in the blink of an eye. Next stop, St. Louis, Atticus announced, consulting the map on his phone. Despite his age, he had embraced technology with an enthusiasm I found both impressive and slightly intimidating. We can make it by evening if we keep a good pace. I nodded, eyes on the highway stretching endlessly before us. The reality of our journey was finally sinking in. We were actually doing this, driving across the country to confront my daughter. The initial rush of defiance that had propelled me out of Golden Sunset was now tempered by practical concerns. Atticus, what exactly is our plan when we reach Las Vegas? I asked. We can't just waltz into the Bellagio and demand to see Sloane. Why not? He countered. It's a public place. They can't stop us from entering. And then what? Create a scene in the lobby? That hardly seems productive. Atticus drummed his fingers on the steering wheel thoughtfully. Fair point. Confrontations work better in private. We'll need to get her alone, away from that mother-in-law of hers. The thought of facing not just Sloane but also Cordelia Harrington made my stomach clench. Cordelia had never approved of me. In her eyes, I was too academic, too opinionated, not polished enough for her precious son and his social aspirations. Our interactions over the years had been civil but cold, like neighboring countries maintaining a fragile peace. I've been checking my messages, I admitted. Sloane is frantic, says she's cutting her trip short to fly back to New Jersey. Atticus glanced at me. When? Today, supposedly, but I'm not convinced. Sloane tends to make dramatic pronouncements she doesn't follow through on. I sighed. She's always been that way. All grand gestures and declarations that fizzle out when inconvenient. Like mother, like daughter, Atticus said with a wink. I beg your pardon? This cross-country journey isn't exactly a small gesture, Waverly. I hadn't considered that perspective. Perhaps Sloane had inherited more from me than I realized, including a flair for the dramatic when pushed too far. The difference, I said after a moment, is that I follow through. Atticus laughed. That you do, and we're going to follow through all the way to that fancy hotel and show your daughter that you can't be neatly filed away and forgotten. We stopped for lunch at a roadside diner in the middle of nowhere, Indiana. The place was like a time capsule from the 1950s. Red vinyl booths, chrome fixtures, and a waitress who called everyone honey, regardless of age or gender. What can I get you folks? She asked, pen poised over her notepad. Her name tag read Maeve, and there was something in her weathered face and kind eyes that immediately put me at ease. What's good here? Atticus asked. Everything's good, Maeve replied with a wink. But the meatloaf is what folks drive miles for. Meatloaf it is then, he decided. Make that too, I added. And coffee, please. As Maeve walked away, Atticus leaned across the table. We should check the news. See if there's anything about 2 senior citizens escaping from a Pennsylvania retirement home. You think we're famous? I asked, amused. Infamous, maybe. He pulled out his phone and began scrolling. After a moment, his eyebrows shot up. Well, I'll be damned. He turned the phone to show me a local Pennsylvania news article. Elderly residents missing from Golden Sunset Retirement Home. There were even grainy security camera photos of us leaving through the service entrance. Authorities are concerned for the welfare of Waverly Thornbrook, 67, and Atticus Finley, 72, who disappeared from Golden Sunset Retirement Home late Monday night. Atticus read aloud. Family members have been notified, and police are asking the public for information regarding their whereabouts. They make us sound like confused wanderers who got lost on the way to the dining hall, I said indignantly. That's how they want to portray us, Atticus replied. 2 senile old folks who don't know what's good for them. Makes it easier to justify locking us away. Maeve returned with our coffee. You 2 look like you're plotting something, she observed with a smile. Road trip? Something like that, I admitted. We're driving to Las Vegas. Vegas? Now that's adventurous. Special occasion? My daughter abandoned me in a retirement home and went to Vegas with her mother-in-law, I said before I could censor myself. We're going to confront her. Instead of the awkward reaction I expected, Maeve nodded approvingly. Good for you. My son tried to get me to move into one of those senior communities last year. Told him I'd rather live in my car. She pulled up a chair and sat down, apparently unconcerned about other customers. The diner was nearly empty anyway. So what's the plan when you get there? I explained our situation in more detail, finding it surprisingly easy to open up to this stranger with the understanding eyes. Maeve listened intently, occasionally nodding or making sounds of disapproval at my daughter's actions. Sounds to me like your Sloane needs a reality check, she said when I finished. And good for you for delivering it personally. You don't think we're crazy? Atticus asked. 2 old folks driving cross-country on what amounts to a revenge mission? Honey, I've been serving food in this diner for 38 years. I've heard every story imaginable from folks passing through. Yours isn't even the craziest this month. She patted my hand. Besides, it's not revenge. It's standing up for yourself. There's a difference. Maeve reminded me so much of my former colleague Helen that I felt an immediate connection. Helen had been my ally in the English department for decades, fighting alongside me for better resources and standing up to administrators who undervalued the humanities. She'd retired to Arizona 5 years ago, and we'd gradually lost touch, one of many relationships that had faded after Elliot's death, when I'd withdrawn into my grief. Our meatloaf arrived, and it was indeed exceptional, moist and flavorful, with mashed potatoes that tasted homemade rather than from a box. My mother's recipe, Maeve confirmed when I complimented her. Some things you don't mess with. As we were finishing our meal, Maeve returned with 2 slices of pie we hadn't ordered. On the house, she insisted. Apple for the gentleman, cherry for the lady, road food for the rebellion. She slipped me a napkin with her phone number scrawled on it. Call me when you get to Vegas. I want to hear how it goes. Back on the road, fortified by good food and unexpected encouragement, we made excellent time. The Subaru handled smoothly, and Atticus proved to be a capable driver despite not having owned a car for decades. City driving keeps your reflexes sharp, he explained when I commented on his skill. Dodge enough taxi-stealing Uber drivers, and highway traffic feels like a Sunday drive. By evening, the Gateway Arch appeared on the horizon, signaling our arrival in St. Louis. We found an affordable motel just outside the city, nothing fancy, but clean and convenient for our early morning departure. As Atticus went to check us in, I finally decided to call Sloane back. My finger hovered over her name in my contacts, anxiety bubbling in my chest. What would I say? How much should I reveal? Before I could overthink it further, I pressed call. She answered on the first ring. Mom? Oh my God, where are you? Are you okay? The police are looking for you. I'm perfectly fine, Sloane, I said calmly. I decided the retirement home wasn't for me. What do you mean it wasn't for you? You can't just leave. And who is this man they say you left with? The police think you might have been kidnapped. His name is Atticus. He's a friend. And I wasn't kidnapped. I left voluntarily. A friend? Since when do you have friends I don't know about? Mom, this is crazy. You need to go back to Golden Sunset right now. They're holding your room and— I'm not going back, Sloane, I interrupted. And I'm not calling to discuss that. I'm calling to let you know I'm safe, so you can stop pretending to be concerned. Pretending? Mother, I am genuinely worried sick. I'm at the airport right now, about to board a flight back to Newark. I hesitated. If Sloane was truly returning to New Jersey, our Vegas plan would need recalibration. But something in her voice made me suspicious. What about the conference? And your girl time with Cordelia? A slight pause. Some things are more important. Like my mother going missing from a care facility with a strange man. Is Pierce coming back too? Another pause, longer this time. No, he has meetings he can't reschedule. But I'll handle this, Mom. I'll come get you wherever you are, and we can talk about better options for your care. My care, I repeated flatly. You mean like selling my house without my consent? Those kind of care options? Mom, that's not— I never said— She took a deep breath. Where are you? Just tell me where you are and we can discuss everything when I get there. I don't think so, Sloane. You had your chance to discuss things with me before dumping me at Golden Sunset. Now you can wait until I'm ready to talk. This is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. No, Sloane. I'm acting like a woman who's taking control of her own life again. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. I hung up before she could respond, my heart pounding. I'd never spoken to Sloane that way before. I'd always been the accommodating one, the understanding mother who put her daughter's needs and feelings first. It felt both terrifying and exhilarating to finally put myself first. Atticus returned with room keys, finding me still staring at my phone. Everything okay? He asked gently. I called Sloane. She says she's at the airport flying back to New Jersey to look for me. He raised an eyebrow. You believe her? Not entirely. Something felt off. I frowned, replaying the conversation in my mind. She said Pierce was staying for meetings, but wait. A memory surfaced. Sloane mentioning her mother-in-law's name when she first called from the Vegas airport. She said she was with Cordelia, not Pierce. She said, we rarely get to spend time together. Meaning her and Cordelia, Atticus noted. So where's the husband in all this? I don't know. But I think Sloane is lying about flying home. I showed him the flight tracking app on my phone. There are no direct flights from Las Vegas to Newark until tomorrow morning. So she's still in Vegas, Atticus concluded, which means our plan is still on. If she is lying, it's even more reason to confront her in person, I agreed. I want to see her face when she realizes she can't manipulate me anymore. That night, in my motel room with its faded floral curtains and slightly too firm mattress, I found myself unable to sleep. The conversation with Sloane kept replaying in my mind, along with memories of our relationship over the years. Where had things gone wrong? When had my bright, loving daughter transformed into someone who could abandon her mother in a retirement home and lie about it? Was it a gradual change I'd been too blind to see, or a sudden shift triggered by some event I'd missed? I thought back to Elliot's funeral. Sloane had been devastated, of course. She'd adored her father. But she'd also been surprisingly businesslike in the aftermath, helping me organize his affairs with an efficiency that bordered on detachment. At the time, I'd attributed it to her way of coping with grief. Now I wondered if it had been the first sign of her seeing me as a problem to be managed rather than a person to be loved. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Atticus stood there in striped pajamas and a robe, holding 2 cups of tea from the motel's vending area. "Thought you might be awake too," he said. "Mind some company?" I welcomed him in, grateful for the distraction from my circling thoughts. We sat at the small table by the window, watching occasional cars pass on the highway. "Having second thoughts?" he asked after a while. "Not about the journey, about whether I ever really knew my daughter." He nodded understandingly. "I've had similar thoughts about Brandon. Looking back, there were signs I missed. Times when I should have seen that he was pulling away, becoming someone different from the boy I raised." "What kind of signs?" "Small things at first. Shortened visits. Calls that always seemed to end with some excuse. Then bigger things, excluding me from family events, forgetting to tell me about my grandchildren's school performances." He sipped his tea. By the time the stroke happened, I was already an afterthought in his life. The retirement home was just making official what had already happened emotionally. His words resonated painfully. Hadn't there been similar patterns with Sloane? The visits that grew shorter and less frequent. The way she'd stopped sharing details of her life. The slight edge in her voice whenever I offered advice or opinions that differed from hers. "I keep wondering if I did something wrong," I admitted. "If I was too critical, too demanding." "We all make mistakes as parents," Atticus said gently. "But nothing justifies abandoning family when they're vulnerable. Nothing justifies what Brandon did to me or what Sloane did to you. So what do we do with that knowledge when we finally confront them?" He considered this. "I think we acknowledge the hurt, but we don't let it define us. We show them we're more than their narrow perception of us. We're not just elderly parents to be managed. We're whole people with lives and choices of our own. Even if those choices include cross-country road trips and breaking out of retirement homes?" I asked with a small smile. "Especially then." He raised his cup in a toast. "To choices that remind the world we're still here." We clinked our paper cups together, and I felt a wave of gratitude for this unlikely friendship that had emerged from such difficult circumstances. Whatever happened in Las Vegas, I would face it with Atticus by my side, and that knowledge made me stronger. The next 2 days passed in a blur of highways, rest stops, and ever-changing landscapes. We crossed Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, and into Utah, watching as the terrain transformed from the lush Midwest to the dramatic mountains and deserts of the West. We developed a comfortable routine. Atticus preferred driving in the morning when his energy was highest, while I took the afternoon shift. We listened to audiobooks, my choice of classic literature, his preference for detective novels, and stopped whenever something caught our interest. A quirky roadside attraction, a particularly scenic viewpoint, a diner that promised world-famous pie. None quite lived up to Maeve's, in our opinion. Each night, we called to check in with our growing network of allies, Roscoe in Columbus, Melissa and Kevin, even Maeve from the Indiana diner. I avoided Sloane's increasingly frantic messages, though I did send a brief text each evening. "I'm safe. We'll contact you when ready." As we crossed into Nevada on the 4th day of our journey, the reality of our imminent confrontation loomed large. We'd driven over 2,000 miles, but the hardest part still lay ahead. What if she refuses to see me? I voiced my deepest fear as Las Vegas appeared on the horizon, a shimmering mirage in the desert heat. Then we make enough noise. that she has no choice, Atticus replied confidently. But I don't think it will come to that. She's your daughter. Deep down, beneath whatever's driving her behavior, she loves you. I'm not so sure anymore. I am. He reached across to squeeze my hand. Look how frantically she's been trying to find you. That's not indifference, Waverly. That's something to work with. His optimism was infectious, and I found myself nodding. Perhaps there was still hope for reconciliation. Not a return to the status quo, but a new understanding between us. We reached Las Vegas by mid-afternoon, the famous strip rising improbably from the desert landscape. The Bellagio stood in all its Mediterranean-inspired glory, fountains dancing in the bright sunshine. As Atticus handed the Subaru to the valet, with considerably more nonchalance than I could have managed, I straightened my blouse and smoothed my hair. I'd chosen my outfit carefully that morning, a tailored navy pantsuit that Elliot had always said made me look like I could command armies. I needed that confidence now. The Bellagio lobby was a cathedral of luxury. Soaring ceilings, an explosion of colorful glass flowers overhead, marble floors that reflected the opulence surrounding us. Well-dressed people moved purposefully in all directions, their conversations creating a constant background hum. Now what? I asked, suddenly feeling small and out of place. Now we find out if your daughter was lying about leaving, Atticus said practically. Let me handle this. He approached the front desk, with the confidence of someone who stayed at five-star hotels regularly, not a retired cab driver who'd spent the last 8 months in a Pennsylvania retirement home. Good afternoon, he said to the impeccably groomed receptionist. I believe my niece is staying here. Sloane Harrington? We're supposed to meet her for dinner, but I've forgotten which room she's in. The receptionist smiled politely. I'd be happy to call Ms. Harrington's room for you, sir. Your name? Atticus Finley. And this is Waverly Thornbrook, Sloane's mother. At the mention of my name, the receptionist's eyes widened slightly. Ms. Thornbrook? 1 moment, please. She typed something into her computer, then spoke quietly into a headset. After a brief exchange, she looked up with a professionally neutral expression. Ms. Harrington is indeed a guest with us. She's asked that if you arrived, you be directed to the Cypress Lounge. It's just past the casino floor to the left. So Sloane was expecting us. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She'd lied about returning to New Jersey, and somehow she'd known we were coming here. Bertie, I murmured to Atticus as we walked toward the lounge. She must have called Bertie, who told her about our plans. Does that change anything? He asked. I considered this. No, in fact, it might be better. She's had time to prepare, which means less chance of a public scene. The Cypress Lounge was an oasis of calm amid the sensory overload of the casino. Soft lighting, comfortable seating, and acoustic panels created an atmosphere where conversations could happen without shouting. A few well-dressed couples occupied corner tables, but otherwise, the space was relatively empty at this hour. Too late for lunch, too early for dinner. And there, at a table near the back, sat Sloane. Alone. She looked up as we entered, her expression cycling rapidly from anxiety to relief to something harder to define, perhaps resignation. She stood as we approached, smoothing her designer dress in a nervous gesture I recognized from her childhood. Mom, she said, her voice carefully controlled. And you must be Atticus. Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Harrington, Atticus replied with unexpected formality, though I wish it were under different circumstances. Please sit down, Sloane gestured to the chairs opposite her. I've ordered tea. As if on cue, a server appeared with a tray bearing an elegant teapot and 3 cups. The civilized presentation struck me as absurd given the circumstances, but I sat down anyway, Atticus taking the seat beside me. For a moment, no one spoke. Sloane poured tea with practiced movements, her hands steady despite the tension crackling between us. How did you know we were coming? I finally asked. Bertie called me yesterday. She was worried about you. Sloane passed me a cup, and before that, I figured it out from the news reports. 2 seniors missing from a Pennsylvania retirement home, one matching your description, spotted heading west in a Subaru registered to a dealership in Ohio. She gave a small shrug. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. Yet you lied about flying back to New Jersey. I was trying to get you to tell me where you were, she admitted. I was worried. Worried, I repeated flatly. Like you were worried when you abandoned me at Golden Sunset and disappeared to Las Vegas. I didn't abandon you, Sloane protested. I got you settled in a safe, comfortable facility with excellent care. The fall was a wake-up call, Mom. You can't live alone anymore. A bruised hip hardly qualifies as incapacitating, I countered. And if you were so concerned about my welfare, why didn't you tell me the truth? That this wasn't temporary? That you were planning to sell my house? Sloane had the grace to look uncomfortable. I was going to discuss that with you after you'd had time to adjust to Golden Sunset. I thought you might be more receptive once you saw how nice it was, how many activities they offer. Activities? Atticus interjected with a snort. Like the riveting chair yoga and bingo tournaments? Or perhaps the thrilling opportunity to watch Lawrence Welk reruns in the community room? Sloane's eyes narrowed. I don't think this is any of your business, Mr. Finley. When you abandon your mother in the same facility where I was left to rot by my son, it becomes my business, he replied evenly. Waverly is my friend, and friends look out for each other, something you might want to consider. Friend? You barely know her. You convinced her to leave a safe environment and drive across the country on some senior citizen rebellion tour. I didn't need convincing, I interjected. I made my own decision, Sloane, just like I'm making my own decision now about where and how I live. And where exactly do you plan to live? In that big, empty house where you could fall again with no one around to help? Or maybe you're planning to move in with your new friend here? The insinuation in her tone was unmistakable. That's enough, I said sharply. I raised you better than to be disrespectful. Something in my tone, perhaps the echo of the authority I'd wielded when she was a child, made Sloane sit back, momentarily chastened. I'm sorry, she said after a moment. But you have to understand how this looks. You disappeared from a retirement home with a man none of us know, drove across the country without telling anyone where you were, and now you're here making demands. It's not rational behavior, Mom. What's not rational is treating your mother like an inconvenient piece of furniture you can put in storage, I countered. What's not rational is lying to me, going behind my back to plan the sale of my home, and then vacationing in Las Vegas while I sit in a room that smells like disinfectant and old Jell-O. I leaned forward, meeting her eyes directly. Where is Pierce in all this, Sloane? And Cordelia? I was told this was a family vacation. Sloane's expression tightened. Pierce is at his conference. Cordelia is resting in her room. She's not feeling well. Convenient, Atticus muttered. Mom, please, Sloane said, ignoring him. Let's be reasonable. You're 67 years old. You live alone in a house too big for one person. You had a fall that could have been much worse. Golden Sunset is a practical solution. Practical for whom? I asked. For you, certainly. For Pierce, who I suspect has his eye on my property value. For Cordelia, who's never thought I was good enough for your father or you. I shook my head. But not for me, Sloane. Never for me. So what do you want? To go back to living alone until something worse happens? To end up in a much less nice facility when you really can't take care of yourself anymore? What I want, I said slowly, is to be treated with respect. To be included in decisions about my own life. To not be discarded because I'm inconvenient. I never said you were inconvenient. You didn't have to say it. Your actions spoke clearly enough. Sloane fell silent, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. For the first time, I noticed how tired she looked beneath her perfect makeup. Dark circles carefully concealed, tension lines around her mouth. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she finally said, her voice smaller. After Dad died, I thought we'd get closer. But instead, it felt like you withdrew from everything. From me. From your friends. From life. I was grieving, I said simply. For 5 years? Mom, you barely leave the house anymore. You turned down the book club Bertie invited you to join. You stopped traveling. You rejected every suggestion I made about getting involved in community activities. I started to protest, then stopped, considering her words. Was there truth in what she was saying? Had I withdrawn more than I realized after Elliot's death? That doesn't justify what you did, I said, but with less heat than before. No, it doesn't, she agreed unexpectedly. I should have been honest with you. I should have had the difficult conversation instead of taking the easy way out. She looked up, and I was startled to see tears in her eyes. I was afraid, Mom. Afraid you'd refuse any help. Afraid you'd end up hurt with no one there. Afraid of losing you like we lost Dad. The raw emotion in her voice caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on my own sense of betrayal that I hadn't considered the fear that might have motivated her actions. I'm not helpless, Sloane, I said more gently. One fall doesn't make me an invalid. I know that. Intellectually, I know that. She dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. But emotionally, after watching Dad decline so quickly, the thought of something happening to you too. Atticus, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, cleared his throat. If I may, he said carefully, it sounds like both of you want the same thing, for Waverly to be safe and happy. You just have very different ideas about what that looks like. Sloane regarded him with new interest. That's a fair assessment, Mr. Finley. Call me Atticus, he said. And believe me, I understand your concerns. My son had similar ones, though in his case they were mixed with less noble motivations involving my apartment and his home office plans. This drew a reluctant smile from Sloane. So what's the solution? Mom clearly hates Golden Sunset, but I can't stop worrying about her living alone. What about a compromise? I suggested, an idea forming. I keep my house, but we look into some part-time help. Someone who checks in a few times a week, helps with heavier chores, that sort of thing. And you'd be open to that? Sloane asked skeptically. You've rejected every suggestion of help in the past. Had I? I thought back and realized she was right. I'd interpreted offers of assistance as judgments on my capability, as the first step toward losing my independence. Perhaps I'd been too rigid, too afraid of appearing vulnerable. I'm open to discussing it, I conceded. But it has to be a discussion, Sloane, not a decision you make for me. She nodded slowly. That's fair. And the house? The house stays mine, I said firmly. At least for now. Maybe someday I'll decide it's too much, but that will be my choice, on my timeline. Okay, she agreed, surprising me with her quick capitulation. But you have to promise to really consider the helper idea, not just dismiss it outright. I promise. A strange silence fell between us, not comfortable exactly, but no longer crackling with the same hostility. We'd reached a tentative truce, though I knew there were many more conversations ahead to rebuild the trust that had been broken. So, Sloane said after a moment, gesturing vaguely toward Atticus, how exactly did this partnership come about? Over the next hour, Atticus and I took turns explaining our escape and journey. As the story unfolded, I was gratified to see Sloane's expression shift from disbelief to reluctant admiration. You really drove across the country to confront me? She asked when we finished. I don't know whether to be impressed or horrified. Both are appropriate reactions, Atticus assured her with a grin. Your mother is quite the woman, Ms. Harrington. Determination runs in your family, it seems. Pierce is going to lose his mind when he hears about this, Sloane said, shaking her head. And Cordelia, oh God, Cordelia will be apoplectic. Speaking of Cordelia, I said carefully, what exactly is her role in all this? The retirement home? The house? Sloane had the grace to look embarrassed. She may have been the one who suggested Golden Sunset initially. Her friend's mother lives there, and she might have encouraged Pierce to look into the real estate market in your area. Of course she did, I murmured. But the final decisions were mine, Sloane added quickly. I can't blame this on her as much as I'd like to. No, you can't, I agreed. But I appreciate the honesty. So what happens now? She asked. Are you coming home? Or, she glanced at Atticus. Do you have other plans? Atticus and I exchanged looks. We hadn't actually discussed what would happen after our confrontation. I think, I said slowly, that Atticus and I deserve a proper Vegas vacation after all this driving, don't you? His face lit up. Bellagio fountains? Bellagio fountains, I confirmed. And maybe a show or two. We've earned it. And then, Sloane pressed, and then we drive back to New Jersey, where you and I will continue this conversation about my future. Together, as equals. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm still your mother, Sloane. That hasn't changed. But I'm also a person in my own right, with my own needs and wants. It's time we both remembered that. She squeezed my hand, tears welling in her eyes again. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I thought I was doing what was best for you. I know, I said softly. But next time, ask me what I think is best. You might be surprised by my answer. Later that evening, Atticus and I stood at the railing overlooking the famous Bellagio fountains. Water danced in perfect synchronization to Sinatra's "Luck Be a Lady," glowing in changing colors against the night sky. "Worth the drive?" he asked, nudging my shoulder gently. "Worth every mile," I confirmed, "though not just for the fountains." "No? No, for this." I gestured vaguely at myself, for feeling alive again, for remembering that I'm not just someone's mother or widow. I'm Waverly Thornbrook, and I still have adventures left in me. Atticus grinned, his face illuminated by the fountain lights. "Any idea what your next adventure might be? After we get back to New Jersey, I mean." I considered this. "I'm not sure, but I know I don't want to go back to that quiet half-life I was living before. Maybe I'll join Bertie's book club after all, or take that Mediterranean cruise Elliot and I always talked about." "Good," he said approvingly. "Though if you're taking suggestions, I've always wanted to see the Grand Canyon. It's right next door, geographically speaking. Are you inviting yourself along on my cruise, Atticus Finley?" I'm merely pointing out that good traveling companions are hard to find, especially at our age. Seems a shame to dissolve such a successful partnership after just one journey. The fountains reached their spectacular finale, water shooting high into the air as music swelled around us. In that moment, surrounded by beauty and possibility, I made a decision. "The Grand Canyon first," I said. "Then we'll talk about cruises." His smile was like the sunrise after a long, dark night. "Deal." As we turned to walk back into the hotel, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead still held challenges: rebuilding trust with Sloane, navigating my changing relationship with my home and independence, and perhaps exploring whatever this new friendship with Atticus might become. But for the first time since Elliot's death, I was looking forward to tomorrow rather than dwelling in yesterday. This wasn't the ending I had expected when I fled Golden Sunset in the middle of the night, but perhaps it was something better. Not an ending at all, but a new beginning. As Atticus and I walked arm in arm through the glittering Bellagio lobby, I thought about the long journey that had brought me here, and the even longer journey still ahead. There would be difficult conversations with Sloane, awkward encounters with Cordelia, and practical matters to resolve about my home and future care. But I was no longer afraid of those challenges. I was Waverly Thornbrook, English teacher, widow, mother, friend, and now, at 67, an unexpected rebel with miles of open road still before me. And I was ready for whatever came next. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. Leave a comment below with your thoughts and experiences. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself later in life?